1. It was a really beautiful summer night, and my friends and I were all sitting on the roof of their building and smoking and drinking. It was that kind of night where you could sleep anywhere. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, and the temperature was so perfect. All you had to wear was a t-shirt and your jeans. No jacket or sweatshirts were necessary. There were probably 5 of us in total. This building was a really old and very large industrial building in our city. There is a well-known room in this building that is nicknamed the Piano Graveyard, because there were tons of pianos all in this one room just collecting dust. The owner wasn't very good at keeping up his property or visiting it, since the property has been sold and is now under construction. Pretty much everyone that rented an artist loft in this building also lived in it, despite this being against the policy of the rental agreement. I love this building to this day. It is one of the most majestic buildings in our city that I've ever had the pleasure of exploring. Back to the evening at hand. There were 5 of us, but the participants dwindled over time until there were just 3 of us, myself, my boyfriend at the time, and his close friend Kurt. We stayed up there probably for an hour or so after the other 2 of our friends had left. One of the really curious things about this building was the way you had to navigate hallways and different levels to get to the very tippy top of the tallest point in the whole building, which was the tower that we had hung out on top of. In the tower was a moderately sized room. I'm not sure what its original use was. There were open windows facing in all directions, and it does have the feeling of a bell tower with no bell. In this room there was the last set of stairs that you had to climb, and they were ridiculously uncomfortable and steep. At this point I had decided it was getting really late and I was ready to go home. I told Kurt and my ex-boyfriend this, and we started to wrap up our time together. Kurt started down the stairs before both of us, and I let my ex-boyfriend go ahead of me, to kind of hold his back for support. It was really late, but Kurt had a flashlight held out so we could see the way. Naturally, Kurt reached the landing of the stairs before my boyfriend and I did. By this juncture of the evening I had had a few beers, and may or may not have been a bit stoned. Due to this, I was super focused on making sure I didn't catapult my body into my boyfriend and Kurt by accidentally missing a step. After all, I'm a known klutz. Because of this, I didn't see what happened at first, but my boyfriend stopped short in front of me. I then realized someone was talking and I didn't recognize that voice.
"What are you doing with that flashlight, man? Don't you know someone lives in here?"
Quickly, Kurt cut the light. My eyes flickered up to find the unknown voice, and I just barely caught a glimpse of a man's figure right before Kurt turned off the flashlight. It fell pitch black in the room, and my heart immediately jumped into my throat. Kurt replied with,
"I'm sorry, man. I didn't want to cause any trouble. I didn't know you were here."
The man replied with something, I don't remember what he said. Honestly, all I could think about was that I had no way to safety. I was literally as backed into a corner as anyone could be. Behind me was the roof and the tallest point of the building, and between us and the door was this crazy man, who was insanely upset that we invaded his personal space, in a tower, in an abandoned part of the building. Kurt seemed genuinely afraid, and judging by their interaction, they didn't know each other. The man threatened us somehow, I can't remember how. I think he said something along the lines that if we went up there again, he would make us very sorry that we did. We left at that moment and went downstairs. All of us were freaked out, but we didn't talk much about it. We were just focused on making it to safety and quickly. When we got to the loft that Kurt was staying in with the other actors of his troupe, we were saying our goodbyes, and I wanted to bring reference to that weird encounter. "That was pretty weird. Did you know who that guy was?"
"What guy?"
Kurt replied. This caught me off guard, but I thought he might have been genuinely asking. So I answered, "That guy we ran into in the tower, the one you were talking to, does he always live there? He seemed super pissed and aggressive." I shit you not. Kurt looked at me like I was crazy and said,
"I wasn't talking to anyone in the tower, Hannah. What are you talking about?"
I decided to drop it right then and there, and my ex and I left for the evening. My ex confirmed my experience, and that it was weird that Kurt would lie about it. I still don't understand why he would lie about that. I have a few theories, but none of them make any sense. He maintained for the rest of the friendship, we fell out due to his being a jerk in general, that there was no guy that he talked to that night, and we might have just been hearing things so eerie and so strange. 2. This was nearly 3 years ago. I'm currently 21. However, this incident happened around the time I had just turned 19. I met my nightmare when I began attending my first fall semester at community college. It was around week 3 of the fall semester, and I had just finished up with my HIS 112 classes, and decided to stay on campus for this magic show. I arrived and watched the show when I saw this guy wearing a "Do you bite your thumb at me, sir" shirt. I'm a huge English slit nut, so I complimented him on his taste. We struck a conversation, and at the time he seemed like a decent person and soon asked for my number, which I gave him. Big mistake. After we parted ways, he asked me if I would like to go on a date with him. I didn't consider this a red flag because some people are just straight to the point. However, I had just ended a 4-year-long distance relationship and was still attempting to get over it. And I also didn't find him the least bit attractive. I politely told him no, and that if he wanted to meet for coffee on campus sometime, I would be up for that. He took me up on my coffee offer, and we agreed on a day to meet, and continued to meet every day for about a week. I suddenly get a text from him asking me to be his girlfriend, which I responded with, "I'm flattered, however, I still hardly know anything about you. You're also not my type, but I'd like to continue being friends." While I did enjoy his company, I wasn't going to lie to the poor guy and act like he had a romantic chance. This, however, set off a whole bunch of crazy. He proceeded to text me things like, "But you don't know me. We've met before." I want to clarify that I have never met this man before, that considering our first meeting was a magic event on campus. He proceeded to use the time I mentioned my father being in the military, hoping to falsely convince me that we had met in the past. I have a very good memory and decided to test him. "Oh wait, are you that guy from when I lived in Wisconsin?" The bait worked, and he replied, "Yes, thank God you remember me." One thing I hate more than anything is a liar, and it looked like I caught one in the act. I proceeded to tell him that I had never lived in Wisconsin and that lying wasn't going to make me want to date him. This angered him, and after a few rude, desperate messages, I turned off my phone and went to my next class. Once class finished, I turned my phone back on and saw I had 58 missed calls, 31 voice messages, and around 217 text messages. I was officially freaked out by voice message number 5 because of the things he said that I don't feel comfortable typing out. I immediately blocked his number after telling him to leave me alone, and assumed that would be the end of it. I was stupid to think that he would just walk away. Every class I took, he could be seen staring at me from the hallway eerily. I didn't want to get campus police involved because the paperwork is excessive, and I thought that sooner or later he would give up, but things only escalated. It got so bad that he found out where I work and proceeded to follow me into the bathroom during my break. I was so scared I rushed into the nearest stall and locked the door, trying my best to keep it together. Enraged by me running away, he attempted to break down the stall I was in, and I was sure he would get to me. Thankfully, a group of guys heard me crying and his banging against the stall door, and rushed into the ladies' room to help me. The group of guys scared him away after threatening to call the police, and I was sent home by my manager and forced to take a week off because she feared for my safety. I finally broke my silence the moment he put me in the hospital. Not even 2 days after the bathroom incident, I had been reading at the local library where I received peer tutoring for my math course. It was around 7 p.m., and I realized everyone had already left. I closed the door and checked to make sure it locked properly before walking to my car. I realized too late that this psycho had followed me and was now crouched next to my passenger side door. I was about 3 feet away from my car when I saw him, and I immediately knew it was fight or flight, and fight wasn't going to be an option for me. I attempted to make a run for it, but was thrown to the ground where he beat me within an inch of my life. I was saved by the driver of a farm fresh delivery truck. The driver noticed my attacker crouched down in front of something, and soon realized that he wasn't crouched down in front of something, he was crouched down in front of someone. My attacker was removing his pants while towering over my beaten and unconscious body, when this brave man tackled him. If it wasn't for him calling 911 and pummeling that asshole to the ground, I would have ended up a victim of not only a brutal beating, but also ended up a victim of rape. I woke up in the hospital and was told I had a concussion, fractured collarbone, broken arm, dislocated shoulder, sprained ankle, busted upper lip, and sustained severe damage to my right eye. I spent 5.5 months in that hospital, and immediately got any school authorities and local authorities involved, with the hopes of putting his ass in jail. He was released from prison May of this year and was informed of my restraining order against him. Around June, this psycho attempted to add me on Facebook, and has been hounding my friends for information since then. I'm starting to think that contacting his parole officer and putting his ass back in jail might be the best option. I'll be sending a link of this to my friends, and will be instructing them to send it to him if he contacts them. So asshole, if you're reading this, I just wanted to say that I got a concealed carry license just for you. I don't plan on contacting your parole officer because if I even see you out of the corner of my eye, I will put a bullet so far up your ass doctors won't be able to remove it. I'll contact him after making sure you're unable to sit comfortably for the rest of your life. Edit to address the parole officer questions. At first I was unsure to call the authorities because every fiber in my body wanted to put a bullet in a place where the sun don't shine. However, he managed to get my best friend's number and was harassing her to get to me. He is now back in jail, and I am in the process of getting a permanent restraining order. 3. I'm a freshman at college, and I've been rushing a fraternity while there. Before anyone gets any ideas, most fraternities in America are not what you hear about on TV. While those certainly do exist, and we even have one or two on my campus, the majority of frats are filled with good and cool guys. One of the things that drove me to the fraternity is that I felt like they actually wanted me there. I loved the sense of companionship and brotherhood that the active members seemed to have for one another. So when spring hit and I was allowed to become a pledge, I did. I was really excited with this, because I knew and liked all of the 14 guys who were pledging, 3 of whom were even my closest friends on campus. And I was happy that I'd get to become brothers in bond with all of them. This fraternity that I pledged was officially a non-hazing one, although they did let us know going into it that there would be some light hazing, because in their eyes going through that brought us closer together, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. Every Thursday night we would participate in things called rituals, which were usually quick things designed to teach us a lesson about what being in a frat meant, and one night, I suppose they succeeded. We went down into our basement, all 14 of us, and the activities were waiting for us. One of them stood up.
"Pledges. This is probably the most hazing we will ever do to you," he said.
He then proceeded to split us all up into groups of 2, and they had us all remove any clothing which linked us to the college or the fraternity, as well as put on warm clothing and give up our phones.
"We will be taking you on an adventure, and you will all work with your partner to bring us something to eat. Stick to the roads and you'll be fine. And don't come back until you find something."
With that, we all had to put bags over our heads. 2 active members guided us to cars, and they drove us somewhere. I was trying to mentally map where they were taking us, but they made a lot of unnecessary twists and turns in a clear attempt to confuse us. Eventually I lost track of where we were as they went down a pathway that I was unfamiliar with. After a little while the car came to a stop. The actives helped me and my partner, a guy named Will, out of the car. They took the cloth bags off our heads, and we were in the middle of nowhere on a country road late at night. I turned to the actives, and they had those classic shit-eating smiles on their faces.
"You're gonna want to walk down that way," one said while pointing. "And remember, don't come back till you'll bring us something to eat. And get creative, don't bring us grass or some shit. Also, no processed food, raw ingredients only."
With that, they got in their car and drove off. Without much wait, Will and I started walking down the road looking for anything that could have been edible. My first instinct was dandelions, because I knew from experience that you could turn those into soup. Unfortunately, it was still early spring. There wasn't much in terms of plant growth around, especially dandelions. Will and I spent a lot of the first part talking and joking around with one another. There weren't any houses for a long while, so we figured we didn't really have to worry about noise. Everything started out great. We figured out early on that the guys that dropped us off would drive down the road every now and then, bathing us in the light of their high beams, just to annoy us. And we would always return that kindness by raising our middle fingers. I did appreciate that they were clearly checking on us to make sure that we were safe, though. I legitimately didn't feel scared at first, as I was with Will, and the actives were still patrolling the roads to make sure we were going the right direction. To be honest, I was just worried about finding something to eat. That's when we saw our first house with its lights still on, and I had an idea. Hey, Will, why don't we just go up to one of those houses and ask them for some sort of raw ingredient? Will shook his head. No way, man. I'm not doing that. I'm black. They might misunderstand something. I did understand what Will was saying there. We were in the middle of nowhere, and having two teenagers come up to your door in the middle of the night, asking for raw ingredients might be misconstrued, especially when one of those teenagers is black in this day and age. I turned to Will and tried to persuade him on this, saying that nothing is really growing around here, so the only thing we could probably bring back is roadkill, and I'd rather risk asking a stranger than lug the bloody rotting corpse of an animal back for several miles. Eventually Will seemed to agree, although he insisted on staying out of sight. I jokingly called him a pussy, and we went up to the house. I rang the doorbell once, and not even 10 seconds later an older man, maybe in his 50s, opened the door. He was balding, a bit thin, and looked like he hadn't showered in days, as cliché as all that sounds. But the thing that really got me was how creepy the fucker was looking at me. He didn't look like he was surprised or irritated to see me at all. Instead, he had this sort of almost half smile, and just stared at me straight in the eyes, never breaking eye contact. "Good evening," he said in a creepy, somewhat higher-pitched voice. "What brings you here?" I immediately got the sense that we shouldn't have knocked on this guy's door. "I'm sorry," I said. "I think we confused your house with someone else's. Sorry to bother you." "Nonsense," the guy said. "Walking down here at night? You must have car troubles. It's okay. You can spend the night here and I'll take a look at your car in the morning." I continued to back up. "No, it's okay, sir. We really don't need any help." For a brief second I saw a flash of agitation across the man's face, before he returned to that creepy half-smile of his. "Honestly, it's no trouble. Come on in. I promise I won't hurt you or anything." At that point, Will stepped out from the side of the porch and into view. "It's okay," he said. "We really don't need any help." The guy seemed a bit surprised that there were two of us, but not really disappointed. But I think with the increase in numbers and Will's "don't fuck with us" tone, the guy slithered back into his house, not saying another word. Quickening our pace, Will and I got out of there. We saw the car with our actives in it pass by twice more before we found an evergreen tree, which was good, because I knew that you could make tea from its branches. Having finally found our raw ingredient, our spirits were raised, and we began to forget about that guy. That is, until we saw headlights up in front of us. Now, we initially assumed that it was our actives again, but it came far too soon after their last pass, so there was no way they could have come around that fast. Additionally, the car that our actives were in had one of its headlights burnt out, and this one had both working fine. We didn't think too much of it at first, and we did see the occasional person just driving down the road. What tipped us off that something weird was happening was when the car cut across, stopping right in front of us, and on the wrong side of the road. There was no way that the message could be misunderstood there. The car door opened and a man stepped out. We couldn't see who it was as his headlights were blinding us, but I could have sworn that I heard him laugh. With only a second's hesitation, Will and I ran off the road and into a patch of forest to our right. We tried to stick together through it, but somewhere or somehow we got separated. I found a bunch of boulders to hide around and waited. I could hear footsteps off in the distance. The voice of the man at the house calling out, "I know you're here, boys," he said. I slowly peeked my head out from behind the rocks and caught the form of that same man about 30 yards away from me. waving a flashlight around and carrying what looked like a shotgun in his hands. I steadily controlled my breathing, being sure not to panic. I knew that the actives would see that we weren't on the road eventually, and then they'd know something was up. That's when I started to scan around for Will. I don't know how, but by some miracle I saw the form of what could only have been Will, hiding behind some brush. I began to worry, because I could see that it didn't provide him with enough cover, and the man was slowly getting closer to him. It would only be a matter of time before he caught him. I began to go through scenarios in my head, imagining that if he caught Will, I'd try and jump him from behind, maybe get that shotgun away from him before he could do anything, and the two of us could easily overpower him. I wanted to do that, but I knew it would never work out. By complete accident, I'd moved my hand around and felt something that gave me another, even better idea. I felt a rock, a heavy, good-sized one, slightly bigger than a baseball. I picked up the thing and with all my strength, heaved it a good way off in the distance. The rock made quite a bit of noise, clearly audible through the woods. The man laughed in a maniacal, crazy way that I'll never forget, almost like a grown man trying to imitate the high-pitched, squealing laughter of young and excited kids. Once he was a good ways off, I came out from my cover and moved towards Will. I got probably about halfway to him before he saw me. I made a motion for him to follow, and he did without hesitation. The guy must have thought he was chasing us deeper in, which was damn convenient, because we didn't seem to be in any danger after that. We found the guy's car on the road, the driver's side door still open. I looked inside but cursed when I saw that he was smart enough to take his keys. Then I looked in the back seat, and a massive lump formed in my throat. Back there was a massive hunting knife and a bunch of duct tape. Making sure that the guy couldn't follow us and so that we'd have a weapon just in case he could, I grabbed the hunting knife and proceeded to slash the man's tires deeply. We made our way down the road the way we were supposed to in order to put some distance between us and the lunatic, making sure to stay off the road. Eventually we saw the distinct single headlight of our active's car. We ran out into the middle of the road, frantically waving our arms like madmen. Not letting him pass us, he stopped and got out, clearly worried. We rushed the car and told him to let us in and we'd explain it. He obliged and continued driving, and we explained everything to him. It was made all the more believable when we showed him the knife and passed by the guy's car, which was still blocking one side of the road. I'd just like to say that I don't blame the frat. They had no way of knowing this would happen, and even afterwards they did not take this lightly. They admitted to the college what they did, and helped us through the process of trying to catch the man, which the police eventually did. They found that he had multiple charges of kidnap, assault, and rape on his background. We and the fraternity didn't get in too much trouble, although they did have to promise never to do that ritual again after this incident. This incident has and will make me forever more cautious around complete strangers. You don't forget about incidents like this. And I still have nightmares about it sometimes. Nightmares where the guy succeeds in catching us. So to the creepy bastard who tried to kidnap and possibly rape and kill us, let's not ever meet. And I'm glad that you're rotting away in prison. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 278. Thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. For those of you who haven't got the notification, the Q&A, I put it up yesterday. Put it up about midnight yesterday. I was going to wait, but I thought, screw it, let's just get it up and let people enjoy it if they're still awake. So for those of you in the UK and other areas where you may have went to beddy buys earlier, it's up now if you want to listen to it. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.